Welcome to the first part of GTLA's training. In these training sessions, I'm looking forward to share with you the workflow for unwrapping a 3D game's character's UV. As the first part of the training, you'll get to unwrap a 3D character's head which has a fragmented part. Later, you shall create an optimum UV layout for it. Through this exercise, you will learn how to use these unwrapping functions such as unfold and smooth UV tool effectively. And before we begin, we will need to have a clear mental model for how to unwrap the model efficiently. From a heuristic viewpoint, we should break the model down into sequential parts as illustrated over here. Once you have established a clear mental model, let's get started. First, let's get on to our Maya interface. Go to File, Project window. In the Project window, give your project a name, say Learning GTLA, and set it to a folder in your local drive as you like. Leave the remaining settings untouched. From now onwards, you should only work from this folder, as a final submission of this assignment would require you to deliver it in this structure. Now let's open up the project folder that we have created just now in Maya. You should be able to see a Learning GTLA folder. Before we begin the training, you will need to download these two working files via the Blackboard system. Once you have them, just drag it into your working folder now. Inside the working folder, simply drag the Maya file again into the scene folder. Next, create a new textures folder for storing the UV checker pattern. And from now onwards, all your texture files that related to this assignment should be stored inside here. When you are done, let's head back to our Maya interface. Go to File and open up the given base mesh, which should be in your scenes folder right now. Here, you should be able to see a fantastic game character for your training use, and do take a good care of him. Okay, we need to set up a workspace first before we start. Go to your perspective viewport panel, look for Layout, choose two panes side by side. Next, do ensure one of your viewports is set to UV Texture Editor. And before we begin, let's check on the incremental save function. You will never know when you need to backup copy. Check on these options and leave the default number to 10. You are free to increase the numbers of save as you like. Now let's click and save the scene and back to our viewports once more. From the UV editor, you could see how fragmented it is of the character's UV. And in this training, we are going to learn how to set it right. Before we begin, let's set up a simple shader for the UV checker pattern. In your Hypershade, simply create a new Lambert shader. With the shader tool selection, go to your attribute editor and rename Lambert2 to shader underscore UV checker pattern. Then just link the color slot with the given texture. Once done, let's switch back on the channel box. And for this training, I shall turn off my polygon counter for now. With the character's head in selection, I shall isolate my perspective view. In these training sessions, we are going to focus on unwrapping the character's head only. With the head still in selection, open up your Hypershade window again, and do assign it with the UV checker shader. Once done, you may close the Hypershade window now. In the perspective viewport, turn on the texture display and have a look of the UVs. Through the practice of UV unwrap, the strategies are always to coordinate the UV into a layout that can be painted by everyone. Let's turn off the texture display for now and focus on the mesh. First, let's clean up all the fragmented elements with a simple planar projection. In the unwrapping process of an organic character, We cannot fully rely on the ready-made preset like planar mapping, as it would not fit the topological flow of a mesh. Distortion is inevitable in most organic matter, and the effect is most drastic in a low-poly mesh, but we could minimize it with the right techniques. Let's start from the horn. Select this edge loop and do ensure nothing else is being selected. In the UV editor, tear the polygon menu out. With the edge loop still in selection, click on the Cut UV function. Next, we shall define the seam for the horn through selecting these edges. With nothing else being selected, cut the UV edges again. Once done, go to the face mode and select these faces. As usual, do a quick inspection and ensure no other faces are selected. Go to the Unfold options and click on it. Reset its settings. Do ensure the Unfold constraint is set to none. Then click Apply. Here you shall see the mesh UV is being nicely spread open. Now let's turn on the checker pattern and see if there is any distortion. So far, there is some minor distortion over here. Let's select back the faces again and convert our selection to UV points. For the moment, let's move it off the grid and rotate it to a more preferably angle. Here I would like to show you the smooth UV functions for minimizing the distortion. With the UV point still in selection, go to the Tool menu and click on the Smooth UV Tools options. Reset its setting, then click Apply. Now try to click and drag the Unfold label with your left mouse button. You will notice the UVs would redistribute its spatial coordinates in accordance to its 3D vectors. To an extent, this balancing act helps to even out the initial distortion that we have. Once you have satisfied with the actions, you could simply exit the Smooth UV function by hitting the shortcut key of Q or click on the selection icon. Now let's continue to work on the character's ear. Select all its faces. For this step, we are going to use the automatic mapping approach. Go to the Create UVs menu, click on the option of Automatic Mapping. And as usual, let's reset its setting. Then click Apply and close the window. Here's another familiar method that we have used before. Let's convert our selection to UV points and move it off the grid. From the perspective viewport, we could see proportion of the UV is distorted. This distortion is largely caused by non-planar surface and is quite commonly found in low poly mesh. For now, let's rotate the UVs to our viewing preferences. In the following steps, we are going to move and solve the UV edges. Start from selecting these edges and click on the Move and Solve UV Edges function. Repeat the steps until you have the whole ear being patched up. While you are solving the UV edges, please do be mindful to hide the seams as best as you could. Once everything has been sewed together, let's select all the UV points and use the Smooth UV tool for minimizing the distortion. Good, there are less distortion right now. As I have highlighted before, a non-planar surface or a greatly twisted polygon will cause this normal display problem. This scenario will not be solved via simple UV methods. Go to activate your split polygon tool now. We will need to triangulate this polygonal face as to define it as a concave surface normal. And same goes for this polygonal face as well. You could simply fix it with the correct directional edge. However, in this exercise, the learning objective is not mesh fixing. Let's undo our previous actions, as you could fix the mesh as you like when you are done unwrapping the UV. Next, let's unwrap the back and the top of the character's head. Select all these faces and unwrap it with the automatic projections. You can turn on the checker pattern for assessing the distortion level. Let's move the UVs off the grid again. And for better texture painting continuity, let's sew these UV points together. And don't worry about the distortion for now, as our main objective is to make these faces flow together as one. Repeat the same steps to these front faces as well. Now let's reduce the distortion with the Smooth UV tool. Once you are satisfied, work out the other faces as well. Do not overdoing it, as you might end up downscaling the UV size. There are still some minor distortion over these areas. No worries, as it is just some topological issue in low poly mesh. Alright, what's remain now is the character's face. Select all these faces, but do exclude the other horn and ears, as we are going to duplicate these faces with the unwrapped parts later. To unwrap the character's face, we are going to use the cylindrical projections. As usual, some form of distortions are expected in this region. Let's convert our selection to UV points and temporarily move it out of the grid. To fix the distortions, we have to detach these faces. At the same time, let's separate this surface that representing the teeth as well. Grab its surrounding edges and cut it off. Then you should move these UV points off the face. Now let's restore the spacing of the surface by the Smooth UV tool. Although the spacing has been restored, its overall resolution is not matching with the character's face. This could be corrected later by scaling or normalizing the UV. For now, let's focus to unfold the teeth. Once you have done with the teeth, let's try to even out the UVs of the entire face and see how much we could reduce the regional distortions. Remember, never overdoing it. Next, let's focus on eye socket region. Select only these points and smooth it out. Repeat the same steps on the other side. Next, you could try to work out the nose region, but distortions are expected from these parts if we intended to stitch them together. Everything is almost done, and let's sew these faces back to the chin line. Select the UVs and use the scale tool for resizing it, then sew it. Once you have done that, let's go for one more round of UV smoothing. Now let's duplicate our horn and ear to its counterpart. Grab hold to these faces and delete them. Then simply duplicate these. Go to the object mode and deselect the face. Flip the mesh via the scale X -1. As you have noticed, I have left out two unfolded faces. Let's fix this if it happens to you as well. And we have done with our unwrapping process. Do you combine these duplicated mesh and don't forget to merge them. Along this 30 minutes demo, the mesh has accumulated quite a number of histories. Let's purge the histories. And I'll rename the mesh. In the following steps, I'm going to show you a convenient way for arranging the UVs within a positive zone. First, let's maximize the UV editor by hitting the spacebar. You could choose to manually fit in your UV layout by using the Scale tool, or you could simply use the layout functions from the Polygon menu. These would automatically help you to generate a layout. However, in most of the times, this automated approach would not be able to deliver an optimal layout, which matches a certain mid-mapping and LOD requirements, and it would not help to maximize any given resolution. By far, manual operation is the best workaround solution at the moment. You will need to overlay some of your UVs for retaining the maximum pixel resolution. And there is no fixed layout in containing the UVs. It's all up to the technical specifications in certain graphic engines pipeline. Every form of layout would have its pros and cons. However, there is a general rules of thumb you could follow. Remember to maximize every pixel you could for better texture resolutions. Now, what's remained not unwrapped is the beard and the character's eyes. And here mark the end of these sessions. Thank you.